You know, it could be so... Huh. Echoey. You know, it could be so easy to end things off forever with that last video, like so many before me have. Just a big old rant, tantrum, talking about all the major frustrations I've had with the system I've been stuck in for the last nearly 12 years and why exactly I feel it's been impossible for me to get over. But just wouldn't be right to do it that way, in my opinion. It would require a little bit more humility, a little bit more accountability, and I like to at least think I have some of that in me bones. So, how about we do a little bit of that? For some of you, this is going to be a little hard to accept. For others, it might be very easy, because for anybody who's been watching me for a good amount of time, I have no doubt that you have either a fair bit of attachment to my content, or you have some kind of a hate boner for me. And the truth is, I don't have a hate boner for myself, but I definitely have a bit of a disdain for myself, at least in the way I've really gone about being a content creator throughout my history, because there's just so many little things looking back that I could have done better. I could have had better planning for when I was trying to do storylines. I could have stuck to those or tried to roll with the punches of my real life a little bit more. I could have been more consistent in my upload schedule, and I could have put more into the scripting and research of my old video essays. I could have done a lot more practice at editing. I have long thought that my own editing is very sloppy and slipshod in places. There's a lot of little glips and glitches and globs that you'll find all throughout my videos where either something just didn't quite line up, I left something a bit out of place, or there was a take where I clearly said the wrong thing or misspoke a little, and it probably should have been reshot if I couldn't find a better take available, and I just didn't. Because, in all honesty, none of that stuff is really interesting to me. The actual craft of video making has never been a fun hobby for me. It's been a vehicle to communicate my views on the properties that interest me. And I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me, but a lot of people also put a lot more effort into being good at driving that vehicle, and I simply haven't. I've never really tried to learn how to write scripts better. I've never forced myself to shoot videos over and over again until I'm able to get most things right on the first take. I never trained myself to actually look at the camera lens. I never really watched video editing tutorials unless I absolutely had to, and even then I would only watch them in the moment I had to, and I would go through that process a couple of times until the lesson of the tutorial actually stuck, instead of just sitting there and training for a little bit beforehand like any normal rational person would have. And it's not like I have the excuse of being limited by what was available to me at the time in this regard, because by the time I got into YouTube, most parts of it were pretty well-trodden territory, or they simply didn't exist yet. And basic things like video editing was one of those things where there was already a wealth of knowledge on how to do it well, and I just never even thought to look into that. For the first, 8 months, I didn't even have video editing software. And then when I discovered that Windows Movie Maker was on the computer I was using at the time, I did very basic, rudimentary stuff. And even then, learning that stuff was just like pulling teeth for me. And over time, I upgraded through Premiere Pro, HitFilm, and now DaVinci. But I've never gone deep. I've never tried to really explore the true potential of what I could be doing. And there's a big part of me that thinks that's part of why my videos haven't been successful in a long time. Yes, I had that interesting, innate, passionate spark of talking about Megaforce when the anger for it was still very much fresh in everyone's minds, but I never capitalized on that success by getting better at doing videos and continuing to do things in that vein later on. And that's a whole other thing. I've never really been a student of the algorithm. I've never tried to pay attention to what other channels are doing to get successful. I've only ever really gone off of the little snippets and table scraps that other YouTubers I'm a fan of have randomly given out. And I've taken that like gospel for years after it was relevant to an almost embarrassing degree. There are still times where I'll say, you know what would help this thumbnail stand out? A blue background, because that's something Digibro said in 2014. And the worst part is, I've known all of this for years. For a long while now, I have very much understood to be good at the game, you have to be a student of the game, and you have to be constantly trying to get better. And I just never put in the effort. It wasn't something I was passionate about, so on some subconscious level, I always made the decision that it wasn't worth my time. And I can't really say why, or that if I could do it over, I'd do the opposite and do better, but I at least am able to acknowledge the mistake I made, that I got into a field simply thinking of it as a way to be able to do the time-wasty things I enjoy and make a living at them without actually teaching myself how to make a living at them. I just expected you hit record on a camera and a microphone and suddenly you're off to the races. And if you learn any lesson from me, from my end here, please learn that that is very much not the case. It's especially not the case in today's overbloated YouTube content creator marketplace. If you want to get into this, you need to bust your ass. You need to buy the right equipment, which is a whole other mistake I made that I didn't even get into here. If you've not been around forever, when I first started out, I was shooting on a shitty flip phone camera. Then I got a decent camcorder, and I used that thing until it fell apart. And after that, I didn't bother to save up, stop buying toys for a little bit, and spend money on a good new video camera. I just started using my phone, and I got a lapel mic that I could plug into it to make the videos sound a little better, and I used them like a boom mic hanging behind the phone. And that led to, when I made the transition to outdoors, my videos sounding kind of crappy, to the point where a viewer actually reached out and offered to go halfsies with me on this microphone. And while I am incredibly grateful for it, there's a part of me that really feels like I wasted that person's time and money, and I'm a little bit ashamed of it. It's still helping me out here at the end, and who knows, I might find some other use for it in the future, but right now, I haven't even used this thing for a full year, and it's kind of lame. But again, if you want to do this, don't be like me. don't spend money on other things. Don't spend time on other things. You need to be willing to dedicate yourself to learning this craft ahead of time. And then you need to have the money set aside to be able to stop your job and do this for like a year and a half straight without making any money before it actually starts returning on your investment, because that's the kind of investment of time and money it takes now. I hear some people say it takes a year. I hear some people say it takes 2 years. And with how bigger and bigger the community and economy of creators on this site keeps getting, I wouldn't be surprised if next year I start hearing people say it takes 3 years worth of investment. But regardless, that's time I really don't have anymore for a lot of personal reasons. And if I'm being totally honest, all of this is entirely my fault. Yeah, I used the excuse of having an ever hectic and changing, tumultuous personal life and wanting to put as much effort as I could into things like modular media, but the fact of the matter is, it was always my choice to treat those things that way. I could have still forced myself to learn some new editing techniques or research a video on a day when I didn't want to write or actually shoot something because of something that was going on in my life, because of some day job that was draining the life out of me. I could have asked the people who I work with at Modular Media to share some of the editing responsibilities with me instead of insisting upon basically carrying each show I co-hosted on my back, aside from no prize, and that was really because it was Boingo's idea to begin with, and after a few episodes we moved to a live format, so there was no editing to really worry about. It was just me grabbing the news stories and show up to blab about whatever comic shit happened that week. But with the other ones, I was making the art, I was picking out the theme songs, I was editing and uploading and releasing, and I'm not saying I blame them for myself making that choice, but I do acknowledge I probably could have come to them at some point in the last couple of years and said, hey guys, I'm feeling a little burnt out here. Is there any way we could kind of redistribute responsibilities for this stuff? And I just never did, because some part of me was more comfortable using the crutch of, I'm too drained from work to make a video right now. I already did a modular video this week. I don't know if I have the energy to also make a video for my personal channel this week. And the guilt and shame over doing that is what led to forcing myself to go weekly this week, along with the factor of just wanting to see if I could change my position in the algorithm by doing so. And these issues go beyond what you guys see the results of. They even extend into my personal life. There's several opportunities I've had as a creator that I've just chosen not to take for whatever reason, and they do kind of hang over me a little bit. For example, when I was about 15, my parents and I kind of simultaneously realized that the whole non-existent homeschooling thing just wasn't working out, and I really needed to have some form of formal education in order to be able to get into the workforce. And so I started going to the GED program of a local technical college, and after about 2 years and 3 attempts at the final exam, I got that done and got my GED. But it was after that that I found out that the actual college portion of the school had a media program that would have taught me how to use more advanced cameras and editors, how to work in a group, and very specific skills that you only really get working in the industry. And what's more than that, because this particular technical school happened to be in a city that was only a few miles from Orlando, Florida, I would have had a direct hiring line into either Disney or the local news stations once I graduated. And I chose not to do that because at the time, a lot of my friends and a lot of the people older than me who I watched as content creators were people who got out of college in the midst of the 2008 financial crisis and were still very bitter about the mountain of student debt and how worthless their degrees were. And as such, I was pretty fearful of going to college. And above that, I didn't like the idea of having to devote this thing that I considered to be my art, my passion, very pseudo-seriously at the time, to someone else's vision. I wanted everything I created to be something that came from my brain in an admittedly pretty egotistical, self-centered move. And there's not a day that's gone by since I've made the decision that little what if I had gone back to school and done that program, creeps right back into my head. Because the other big thing is, I would have had to put my channel on hold for a while because I would have been taking a very serious video making course and I would have been working a day job at the time, and it would have been a lot, especially because that was also around the time that my dad's struggle with diabetes and other associated illnesses and my sister's drug problems began ramping up. And it was a very creatively hard time for me. But there's a part of me that goes, well, if I had done that, if I had taken that course, maybe right now most of the problems that have been problems for me over the last few years wouldn't be problems. Maybe I wouldn't be in this position. Maybe I would have gotten a job at some local Florida news station or at Disney, and I'd have a steady paycheck coming in doing the thing I claim to like, at least in part. And even if I hadn't gotten a job in one of those fields, or I had gotten that job and had managed to lose it after a little while, well, my skills would still be a lot better. I'd still be a lot sharper on the mic, in front of the camera, in the editing bay, and with a script. But now I'll never know, because I've since moved away from Florida. And that's where another big regret comes up. Because you see, I didn't have to move up here back then. It was a choice. And there actually was a proper choice, because by that point I was an adult and I had a friend who I had met through one of my day jobs, and we were pretty tight, and he was having issues with his guardian and at times wasn't staying at home anymore, was staying with us or was staying in a shelter of some kind. And when the decision was made by my parents to move up here to help with my dad's medical expenses and the rising cost of living in general, they basically offered me and my sister the choice of, you can come with us, you cannot. And my friend, who I don't want to name here because there's really no point in it. I don't even know if he still watches my videos. I know he watched occasionally back then, but he had the idea that maybe we could start making more content based around us being friends, reviewing stuff together, maybe playing video games together, that kind of dynamic. And We talked about maybe getting an apartment in Florida and trying to find better paying jobs. And at the time, while the idea sounded enticing to me, it didn't feel right because of everything that was happening with my dad and the fact that my younger sister was choosing to not go with my parents, which would end up biting her in the butt, but the video's not about her. And my older sister had basically abandoned our family about a year prior. So the way I saw it, my parents really only had me to rely on. And my mom wasn't doing a great job of keeping up with my dad's needs. She was good at it, but she wasn't great, and she needed the help. And there was a part of me that felt like I owed the help to my dad in his what ended up being his last few years of life because of everything he had given to me as a father. And so I told my friend that they would basically be on their own. And they helped me pack up, and we talked and joked about meeting up again sometime, but I haven't heard from that person since about a month after I moved up here. And that was almost 5 years ago now. And I really liked that guy. And there's a part of me that worries that because of change, because of giving up control in my content, because of a misplaced sense of right and wrong, that I ruined a friendship. And in a way, I feel like that's all I've been doing for the last 12 years. The fact of the matter is, as much as I try to project this persona of cool, cocky YouTube guy who has all the hope and positivity in the world, who thinks it's all eventually going to work out, there's a lot about my current actual life that really upsets me. I'm 26 years old, almost 27. 30 is right around the bend. And I've got a gut like I've been guzzling beer my whole life. I'm graying in several places. My hair's already thinning. I live with my mother. I drive a old car that has a new exciting problem every month, it feels like. I've never really had a consistent, tight group of local friends beyond that one I just told you about. Not since becoming a teenager, not since becoming a YouTuber. I've never really gotten to know any coworkers I've ever had beyond that one instance I told you about because, I don't know, it just didn't seem relevant to me because I didn't think I'd be there very long. And in a way I was right, but not the way I thought I was. And perhaps most stinging of all, I've never had a long-term romantic relationship. And don't read into that. I do want one. I am very much someone who has desired partnership and companionship for basically the entire time I've been aware that such things were a possibility for me. But despite going on a few dates here and there and other more intimate encounters of the one-off nature, I've never opened myself up to the possibility of having a long-term partner. because I've always held the belief, why should I waste somebody's time when I don't really have much to offer in terms of a life partner? Sure, I'm a nice guy, sure, I know some cool stuff, sure, I may be funny every once in a while, but my career's a joke. I'm pretty much penniless. Actually, scratch that. I'm practically, actually, basically, $3,000 in debt. And that might not sound like a lot to you, but considering I've been struggling with that off and on for almost 10 years now, sure feels like a lot. You see, perhaps my greatest shame in doing all of this is that I've actually driven myself into slightly crippling amounts of debt over all of this. And it's not because of equipment. It's not because of hiring help. It's not because of all the reasons that you could understand somebody doing all of this. It's because of toys and physical media, whether it be comics, DVDs, Blu-rays, or even the occasional video game. All manner of frivolous ways of getting rid of one's own income. I have put a good bit of time and mileage into 2 different credit cards all since Power Morphicon 5, which in and of itself was a somewhat ill-advised trip looking back. You see, the whole reason I went to Power Morphicon was twofold. It was because I wanted to meet the friend group I had made within the Power Rangers and greater Tokusatsu fandom in person, but also because I felt this need to prove that I really was someone, that I meant business, that I was going to be out there and part of it all, and a fandom figurehead of sorts, a person you could look to and say, that guy really knows what's going on with Power Rangers and Tokusatsu and all that good, cool stuff that he likes to talk about on his YouTube channel. I went there because I wanted to put the word out that Megaforce Sucks was coming, and I figured it was going to be a pretty cool, pretty big thing. And I had no idea of the repercussions of that at the time. And just to make it happen, I spent about $1,000 I didn't have. And then a while later, my credit line opened up. And instead of just accepting that and treating that as an emergency fund and paying down the money I owed to the company, I went out and spent it on toys because a lot of new stuff had just dropped and I wanted to be perceived as always being on the cutting edge of whatever was coming out, of being in the know, part of the conversation. And about a year later, when a different credit card company offered to sign me up for another one, I took them up on that. And then when I finally got the first one paid down, another company came along and offered me a deal. And at the time, my dad's medical expenses were getting really big. And so I just took it and helped my parents out. But then I didn't pay that one off. I didn't pay the second one off. I'd put a little bit on them, sure, but every time a local convention would come around, well, I just had to raid the dealer room. Couldn't just go look, couldn't just admire the things in person. I had to have them for a brief amount of time until I'd resell them to my local toy shop in order to get funds to get something else that was new and shiny or that I wanted or that I actually needed, like a fixed computer or something that went wrong with my car recently or something like that, instead of actually saving for events like that and only spending the money on these frivolous things when I needed to. I continued to let this addiction to spending money that wasn't mine get the better of me. And it's pretty much gotten me nowhere. The whole thing has gotten me nowhere. In fact, it's gotten me into a negative space where I still owe about $3,000 right now to 2 different credit card companies, and I wouldn't ask anyone to pay it for me. I have to pay that myself. But part of acknowledging that is also acknowledging why I did that. Yeah, I just gave you a bunch of reasons, but the real reason is that I was trying to be somebody I'm not. I was trying to project the persona of the Vacuuminator, the cool, affluent YouTube man who's always able to get that thing he wants. I was trying to make the dream a reality before it actually was, and in such a way, I ended up costing myself that dream. And now I look at that dream and I say, it's not a dream anymore. Certainly not a nightmare, but it's a burden. It's one I have to get rid of. I can't go on trying to be someone else, because I have loved doing this. Every part of me has gone into being the Vacuuminator, creating this dream persona that is really just parts of me emphasized. It's in ways all I've ever wanted, and in others it's all that's ever been tormenting me. And I think the only way to rid myself of that torment, the only way to get better, the only way to fix any of the problems I have mentioned in this video is to let it go. So, after next week, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the Vacuuminator go. And in 2024, I'm going to try and figure out whoever the hell Simeon Scott is.